Hi, I'm Braun and welcome to the first episode of the Power of Quality vlog series. Today I have Stacey Lewis, who's our Market Research and Insights Manager, joining me for an insightful discussion on quality in new apartments. Now, I can say, having worked with Stacey for a while now, she's becoming quite the authority in this space, and so I know this is going to be a great discussion. Hi, Stacey. Where are you beaming from?
Hey Greg, from my home office, as most of us are at this time still, hoping to get back soon, but...
And what are you going to tell us today?
Yeah, so very exciting. So in case you haven't been across the work that we've been doing, the Developer Insight series, we've kind of been at Prop 20 and done a couple of webinars. I've been working on a project that we have done over the past 5 years where we go out and speak to new home buyers, new apartment buyers about everything about purchasing property. So what they're looking for in property, how they go about it, go through that journey. And one of the things that we wanted to focus on with this round of research is quality, is what we'll be talking about today.
Awesome. A hot topic, and one that doesn't seem to go away either. I see there's always seems to be always an article, a news report, something talking about quality in new builds, new apartments. So yeah, hot topic, and I suspect it's here to stay for a little while longer with us as well.
Yeah, definitely. So that kind of prompted the reason we wanted to focus on quality. It always kind of comes up in our research findings, no matter whether we want to focus on it or not. Yep. But when we were looking to kind of scope out what we wanted to focus on, which was around kind of September, October last year, the publicity around quality in the apartments market was obviously really, really high. And we wanted to focus in and see if that's having an impact on what buyers are doing and how they're choosing and all of that kind of thing.
For sure. Awesome. So I guess just for the viewers, a quick kind of nerdy stuff from me. So we do this research. Annually. We spend a lot of time thinking about what goes in it, and therefore what comes out the other end. Because it's not just about collecting data, which I think organisations can be guilty of. It's also about turning that data into insight, something you can actually do something with. And then getting back out to the industry, such as yourselves. So that's why we do it. It's in collaboration with our research partner, Honeycomb Strategy. And it's really about just unearthing those insights for our customer base, builders and developers, such as yourselves. The other thing I think is really important about this, I did say it was nerdy, but it's important, is that it's representative of the market. So it's not just going out and talking to a few people to get this impression. It's actually going out to to a very wide audience that we can actually then roll it up and generalize and say this is what the kind of consumer base is thinking, feeling, and doing. And I think that's a really important point here, that we can actually make those statements. So let's get into it. Nerdy stuff over. I've seen some of the results, but and there's some fascinating stuff in there. But there's some real key kind of highlights for me that I wouldn't mind kind of pressing you on and just seeing where getting a bit more information about those. The first one is around obviously quality, but 64% of new apartment buyers worry about the quality of new apartments in Australia. Now this is huge. Can you unpack that statistic for me a little bit more?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Obviously, that was kind of the first thing we wanted to understand about buyers, how they're considering quality, and we can see quite clearly that is something that they're concerned about. We did ask this in a prompted manner, but what we actually found when we went through the research, we asked about how they were feeling through the process as well, and both in terms of positive emotions and negative emotions, and then we prompted them to kind of explain why. And quality still came up as one of the key things that they were concerned about. Unprompted, they were kind of talking about things they'd heard in the media. So immediately saw that this is having an impact on their decision making. And it's kind of a real concern for them, that it would happen to them as well. We did ask another question that highlighted that most people felt like it's not just something that's happening out there and they're kind of rare one-off things. It's something they really need to be on top of to make sure that they, control that choice process, I guess, for them, so that they're out to try.
Yeah. And what do you think, alluded to kind of some of the news that we hear, from overseas as well as domestically, around quality in apartments. Do you think that's kind of driving up the agenda for a lot of consumers, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think that's kind of brought it to light. I think that it's always something that, in terms of getting a good quality product, because it is complicated. It's a complicated thing. It's most people who are looking at new apartments are first-time buyers, whether they're looking to invest or buy something to occupy. So there's so many unknowns, and I think that that has a huge impact in terms of them just making sure they're getting something that they know is not going to fall apart when they're making such a big investment.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, that it's such a big investment, and you, to some extent, it's a unique purchase in the sense that you don't make these types of purchases often, obviously, but you don't really do it anywhere else in life either, where, particularly for new apartments, where you're almost buying something that you can't see, you can't feel, and you can't touch. There's such a big price tag attached to it. It puts you at a very strange kind of nervous and anxious position as a consumer. I've done it a couple of years back, so it's still very fresh in my mind. I'm sitting in Collingwood right now, surrounded by other new apartments going up, so that the memories are even kind of fresher because I feel that experience. What I always found interesting is how, for other relatively big purchases, you have this, if you go outside the category and think about, automotive, you have NCAP ratings for those. So you already know that talks about safety. It's almost a consumer tag that people can talk about to actually give anyone that's buying it and anyone they're talking to assurance that it's a safe vehicle, that it's passed all of this regulation, and it's a consumer tag. I just don't know if that really exists right now commonly for consumers when they're buying new apartments and new buildings. There's no that common friendly way of describing the quality assurance that you get, but definitely something to think about for the industry as we progress.
Yeah, and I think it kind of is tough as well, just from a perspective of that, like no build is going to be exactly the same, no build is exactly the same site, so it becomes really complicated.
Yeah,
you got to do that as well.
Yeah, it's a really good point. The next figure that fascinated me is that the 77% of the people we spoke to, consumers, they highlighted quality assurance as a key benefit to buying new versus established. So that feels somewhat kind of at odds in a way.
Yeah, when we initially looked at the results, we kind of were like, this is a complete contradiction of what we've just talked about. So the fact that people are concerned about quality in the new apartments market, but then they're saying that's actually a key, that quality assurance they're getting is a key reason they would choose new over the established market. And what that really highlighted when we were looking deeper into the data and kind of trying to figure out what was going on is that actually quality is something that people are going to be concerned about regardless. Just because we've seen it in the media or they've heard, for whatever reason it's top of mind, it's still going to be top of mind in the established market as well. And in fact, some of the conversations that we had with buyers and the comments that came through in the survey were talking about, asbestos, being an issue with if they're buying established, things like wiring issues or the building quality standard not being as high, perhaps like, you're buying something that's 30 or 50 years old, with the standard's just not going to be as high as what we're getting today.
So it feels like almost like the consumer's trading off established, which they know is there, they can feel it, touch it, see what it is, versus something that isn't yet there, but has these issues and this reputation to some degree surrounded that there could be quality issues. And yet they're also trading off the fact they're getting all these new shiny things because it's a new apartment, which is also a key benefit. So you can see it's quite a circular kind of web of thought and decisions that are going on in their heads. Quite a complicated thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it reminds me, we did do some testing internally around trying to understand that. And the thing that some of our internal people came back with was talking about exactly what you're talking about, how they would kind of flow in and make a decision on something and then flow out. It was kind of like a matrix of decision making, and we kind of see that in all of the behaviours that we see on site as well, where people kind of, you feel like they're making a decision, but then they expand out their criteria again because it doesn't quite work. That kind of pull.
So it feels like the challenge for developers here is really just making that decision making easy and taking away that anxiety of what they're getting, which is generally a strong product, but taking away the negativities that surrounds that with all the all the issues and concerns that they have with the construction of new apartments generally. This does bring some memories back for me, having gone through this process and moved into my apartment maybe 18 months ago. Because, I bought for many reasons. I bought because, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, where I was going to be, and having kind of a new apartment that was hassle-free. It's got, easy to rent out if I needed to, all of that stuff. Little maintenance, aesthetically pleasing, very few running costs, nothing's going to break. But with all that in my head, it actually sets up a huge set of expectations about, about what I'm going to get, and is it going to actually deliver on those things. And as soon as things start going wrong, or they're not right, or not as you expect, it actually starts to really erode that confidence that you had in that purchase, which I think is a really interesting challenge as well, that you're actually going to deliver on what you have set the consumer up to believe you are going to deliver. As consumers, we're not becoming any more patient. If anything, we're becoming less patient. And with all this money that's being exchanged, there's a lot of pressure on to get these things right. I was reading the other day a KPMG study that talks about how Australia at the moment has a huge expectation around consumer experience and what they understand that to be. But there's this huge gap between what they want and what they're getting from brands within Australia, and that gap is only getting wider. So I think that's a really kind of relevant point here, that kind of promising what you're going to get from a consumer's perspective and actually delivering on that is becoming more important now than it's ever been.
Yeah, and I think that's where we need to think about how our communications flow into that. We do get a lot of feedback around people feeling like, when they do kind of sign the contract, that they don't get anything from that point, and that communication through the build and that can build that trust and just help them give them a little bit of transparency. They're never going to understand the process because it's complicated to build, but giving them a little bit more transparency in terms of what's going on and the things that are happening and how they're resolving it through that process and what goes into that build, I think would go a long way in building trust and maybe helping a little bit. I mean, you would know, having gone through that process.
Absolutely. I think some of the things that stick out to me that didn't go quite right, there's we've got the electrics in the building. We found out a year later are from Europe and really expensive and difficult to source. We've got a car stacker that seems rarer than a snow leopard. You cannot service this thing without paying someone a lot of money, and it's because the builder went into administration. We had a bit of a job to find a new one, and what they've come in and fixed it with is probably sub quality components in some ways, and you don't know that as a consumer. You don't realize that's going on, but you kind of have to deal with the aftermath. So it's about getting things right first time, I think, if anything, because there's still these things that are eating away in me now. When I find out that another thing in the building isn't quite as it was planned to be, it does still kind of tarnish that reputation of quality. So getting it right first time is really, really important. I want to move on to the next highlight for me in the research that you've conducted. 61% of new apartment buyers highlighted quality as the main factor in how they choose a development. Do you want to say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so this isn't surprising, obviously, given everything we've talked about in terms of it being really top of mind, and something, one of the main reasons that they're considering you as well. This flows through to how they're choosing a development. So quality related factors came out on top in terms of how people consider a development, and that was ahead of price related factors. It was ahead of the actual product itself, location, any investment kind of related returns and service as well, which was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, awesome. It's such an interesting one. It is so top of mind. Again, I'm kind of reliving some of these days, as I often do. But it's so interesting how quality is so important for the consumer. Yet the touch points that they can actually touch, but also the kind of information they can find out, it's relatively limited. Again, for a purchase of this size, again for a purchase that is pretty unique to make in your life. Dwelling again on my kind of history, you have this heavy reliance on the marketing and what that's actually telling you. That what it's telling you is true, and what it's going to give you actually get. And the other thing as well, you have the quality information, I suppose, is coming from sales agents. And let's be honest, sales agents are they do a great job, but they still have reputations in market for a lot of consumers, that they're just there to sell, get a commission. So they'll kind of tell you what you want to hear, and you have to kind of believe it because you don't have anything else to go on. So you're already starting from a low trust base, and what they tell you, you have to kind of take. But it comes with an ounce of skepticism. And the other thing is the display suite as well. That's pretty important, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's so interesting that you say that, because what we've kind of found in the results that were coming through is that, yes, people want to hear directly from the developer themselves, and obviously they want to understand that they're doing a good job from their sales agents and what they can deliver. But the main things that people are looking for is actually to be able to assess quality for themselves. So they want to be able to kind of go out and verify what sales agents are telling them about their product, go out and talk to, hopefully be able to talk to people who have purchased before, which is tough in this market. Yep. As I was saying before, it's not like a car where you can go and, you've purchased Toyota, you've purchased Mazda, you've purchased this. You can't, you're not going to have that network. But they kind of want to go out and see previous developments and go into the display suite as well and be able to touch and feel and get a better understanding of how, of what, how that will, translate into the final product.
Yeah, and again, but that even that feels. Display suite. It feels like it was a true representation of what we ended up getting. But again, it's a trust-based thing, because the cynic in some people might suggest that you saw the display suite, you signed on dotted line, 2 years later you move into your apartment, but you don't remember what you saw, how it felt. You can't compare. The thing got knocked down and built upon. So how would you even be able to? You go on Google and see what else they've done, other developments, but who's to say that's going to be the same as this one? So there's all these things that are markers, and they do help, but you just have to trust a lot. So I feel like it's about how do you really get that across in the best way possible, that you can provide that reassurance more than currently done. So a big question with all of that, I suppose, would be, how do buyers actually then go on to assess quality? What are the things that they're looking for?
So I think, as I kind of alluded to, the main things that came out of the actual survey results is they are looking to go see previous developments.
Yep.
that we've got, they are looking for the display suite. Although I think more so when they go to the display suites, they're more probably focusing on fixtures and fittings and that kind of thing, rather than the broader picture of how it ends up in 10 years' time. You know, as you mentioned, some of the things that you've kind of had to deal with, they're probably more some of the things that they're looking for when they're looking at previous developments, and also just being able to go in and have a look around and that.
Yeah.
So if there were a way to kind of be able to enable them to do a walkthrough or visit previous developments, I think that would go a really long way.
One of the problems I have is almost visualizing a 3D, a floor plan, and actually trying to conceptualize what that will be like in my mind. I struggle with that. Have you heard anything about, people wanting kind of 3D models, or just an ability to better grasp how their space will feel and be able to move around it? That could even be a 3D video or model or something like that.
Yeah, it's not something we specifically asked about, but when we did do some of the interviews, it's something that came up organically, that they were, being able to understand how you would fit in that space and understand the light and the furniture and how that all fits in is really, really important.
Yeah.
Because it can be really difficult, even if you get a floor plan and it doesn't have the furniture in it, and it's on a piece of paper. Just without having that, you can't visualize how big that space is going to be.
For sure. Yeah. Oh, I know it so well.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about just quickly about word of mouth. Can you say a bit more about where that fits in? Because my experience of word of mouth, again, it's really important. First of all, to say consumers deem word of mouth as probably the biggest influential factor in making any kind of purchase decision generally. So, if you hear it from 3 people that you should go and watch or buy Netflix or, rent it or, buy a certain type of car, these things carry a lot of weight. And it's probably, as I say, the most important thing. But I'm getting the impression maybe word of mouth isn't quite as important here in this scenario. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think it is. I think what's tough about word of mouth in this space, as you've alluded to, is the fact that not everyone is going to have the direct experience that you need to be able to, make that assessment. Even testimonials online are definitely going to have a role, but again, given the product is going to be so different with the location or even the spec, like they might not necessarily be getting a like-for-like development, even though it's the same developer doing it. If it's not the higher end or the lower end or whatever market they're going after, it's not necessarily going to be representative either. So I don't feel like it does play as strong a role as it could in other industries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Great. So I guess kind of thinking about wrapping some of this together. How do we get ahead of the quality conversations in this industry? How do we kind of move things on?
I think being able to give buyers access to obviously display suites and being able for them to be able to see what their work looks like in the flesh online as well is really important to positively represent your brand there, because that's likely the first place they're going to be exposed.
Yep.
So one of the things that we looked at was visitation to display suites and things like that, and not everyone is going to actually go to a display suite. So if you want that purchase to come through, and even if they do visit, sometimes it's they've made the decision before they get there. So it's really important to have that brand presence really illustrate that quality picture before purchase. And also just really good quality communications, I think is really important, just so that you effectively building trust, because they're not going to understand quality in the way that developers do, because they're not developers. They don't understand the construction process inside and out. And there's no way to educate them on that, and they're probably not going to listen anyway. But being able to communicate well and build that trusting relationship as they go through is I think will go a long way in terms of helping them. It almost have a flow-on effect to that trust that you will deliver what you say you deliver.
That's really interesting. My experience was that you've signed dotted line, you're moving in 2 years' time, but in between those 2 years, there's not a lot that goes on, and you're desperately craving information about the progress of the build, or actually any information. And so I think that's a really nice opportunity, or potential opportunity to a gap to fill, that if I got sent information about the status of it, the quality, information that's made simple for a non-developing consumer audience, about the architecture, about the foundations. It's kind of stuff that you'll actually get excited about, because if it's done in the right way, because you're a captive audience, you're going to read this stuff because you're so excited about all this money you just spent and waiting for it to move in. And two, it gives you something to talk about with your friends, because you are always talking about this stuff, going, oh yeah, we've been sent another photo 6 months later and it's coming up and the scaffolding's gone up and isn't it wonderful? But if you could then actually start saying, well, and I've got some funny, interesting facts about the foundations and the construction and the materials and the quality, I think that's a great opportunity to kind of even start talking about your brand, talking about the products, and actually that in that word of mouth, and it's another way of getting out that crucial information.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were kind of saying before, word of mouth is such a powerful channel, and there isn't as much access to that, given that not everyone is always going to, have someone that they can talk to that's built from the same development, looking for that same product. But if you can provide that positive experience, then, and it's interesting because people are learning that it will get out there, and it might, be 2-3 people deep.
Yeah, so word of mouth is a really powerful experience, but it's being underutilized in this space.
Yeah. And it's that, they say that if you go 6 people deep, you'll kind of talk to everyone in the whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's let's start with Melbourne, Australia, take over the world at least. Awesome. So, and then anything around kind of client testimonials or anything around that that we can use?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's probably one of the like a really big missed opportunity if you're not getting on board with that, and getting customers or buyers to give you an honest feedback that you can utilize and help, I guess, even connect them with potential buyers, so that they can have an honest conversation about what's hard and what's not, what worked well and what they were really pleased about, and what potentially they maybe weren't as happy about. I think the positive thing about getting feedback from people who have bought is that the psychology of when people commit to things is that they will always justify their decision. You'll always be like, yes, but this was the right decision for me. It's very rare that someone turns around and actually throws themselves off the ledge and goes, I did a terrible thing. They'll always rationalize. That's just who we are as humans. So much that we can do, like you can do to leverage that, I think.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I could talk about this all day. Unfortunately, we don't have all day. The sun has definitely come out where you are, and that has brightened my day. I'm going to say thank you so much for joining me today, Stacey. Very much look forward to chatting with you next time as we unpack the quality data around the house and land buyer.
Yeah. Really looking forward to checking in, and also the other upcoming vlogs you've got kind of planned as well. I'm looking forward to checking.
Fantastic.